Hello, and welcome back to another update as I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It's your host, Wave Union, and we start out here to the west of Avdiivka, where the Russians have made a small advancement here west of Tonenke. This is simply capitalizing on the recent advancements made by the Russians to the south of these positions, where the Russians gained full control over the majority of the fortifications here to the east of Yasnorodivka. And the Russians are now advancing via two main roads, the ones here to directly west of Tonenke towards Yasnorodivka, and the one going from the northern parts and west towards Yasnorodivka. This will allow the Russians to attack from two directions once that they have consolidated their gains, and will start the new part of the operation, which is to push further westwards towards Yasnorodivka, cutting off the connection between the Ukrainian positions in Umanske and Italy over here to the south. Moving further north in the direction of the south of Belorivka, it was reported on yesterday that the Russians started an attack towards the Ukrainian fortified positions and trenches marked out here to the east of Verkhnokamianske. And with this, we see that there is an advance and foothold gained by the Russians in this attack. It is likely that the fighting will continue over these fortified positions. We can see them on the satellite image. There are these diagonal zigzag trenches that are covering this whole area. It's a very wide and well-connected trench network. And this will allow the Russians, if they manage to capture it, to gain control over the heights, as the area right here is a hill overseeing Verkhnokamianske, and getting control over a height with a fortified position to the east of the village, completely connected with it, will allow the Russians to imply heavy pressure on the village and possibly start offensive operations in that direction. The Russians had previously stormed Verkhnokamianske and fought over the village, but as we can see, for many months and over a year now, the Ukrainians had firm control over it thanks to this fortification to the east of the village. Now that we have covered the territorial changes, we go on to geolocated footage. First off, we have here to the northwest of Kreminna, east of Terny, right here, geolocated footage of Russian positions right there. It is already reported to be under Russian control, according to my map. But with this, we see that there is renewed operations in this direction, as the Ukrainians are launching FPV strikes on Russian positions. The Russians are likely exposing themselves in an offensive operation in an attempt to push through the forest areas, forest patches here to the east of Terny. This will allow them to create a third front here in the direction of Terny and expanding their zone of control east of the village. Moving further south here, we have in the direction of Krasnodarivka this footage here, which confirms that the Russians still have their foothold in the southeastern parts of the city. It is also seen that the Russians are sending armored vehicles and infantry reinforcements towards the southeastern parts, which means that the offensive operations continue as they attempt to push in a northern and western direction from this foothold, expanding their zone of control and threatening the Ukrainian fortifications in the central parts of the city, which is very significant for the Ukrainians' defense of the city. Moving a bit further south, we see here in the direction of Urashaine, the Ukrainians have launched some small positional fighting to the southern outskirts of the village. This comes as a result as the Russians restarting offensive operations to the south of Urashaine, but so far all of the fighting has only been positional. There's been no advances by either side, and it's simply a small back and forth between them as the Russians are attempting to push the Ukrainians back here in the southern outskirts of the village. With this, we see that fighting continues across the front line, with the focus points being here to the west of Donetsk and north of Bakhmut, as well as in the Bakhmut direction. There's no significant changes elsewhere on the front line. Now, through the night, the Russians launched another missile and drone strike across Ukraine, where yet again the main targets was the Ukrainian energy grid, of which we see this footage here, which shows a thermal power plant in Kiev burning completely, and this is a result of Russian missile strikes on those positions. With these two pictures here, we see the trajectories of the missiles and drones flying into Ukraine. We see that a bunch of missiles flew to western Ukraine, and others here to the southern parts of Lviv in the direction of Stry, and these are both missiles and drones hitting the Ukrainian natural gas reserve underground. And this is mainly the Kinzhal missiles hitting those positions from the MiG-31s. This is to completely diminish the Ukrainian gas reserve, which would get rid of any backup power that the Ukrainians have available. At the same time, we see this article here by the Washington Post about a US general. His name is General Christopher Cavoli. He gave a briefing to the United States political meeting, and in that he talks about the current situation of the front line. He starts out with the fact that the Russians currently have, according to him, a 5-to-1 artillery advantage along the front line. The command of the US European Command, which is his current role, warned in a few weeks the figure will rise from 5-to-1 advantage to the Russians to a 10-to-1 advantage to the Russians if the United States does not send help. And then he adds to that, the side that cannot fire back will lose. Ukraine will soon run out of shells and air defense systems, the Washington Post quotes Cavoli as saying. And finally, as the Pentagon said that if the United States does not provide assistance to Kiev in the coming months, the previous 2 years of investments will not pay off. To translate that into non-political words, he's basically saying that the Russians have a significant advantage right now, and that significant advantage will grow and grow over the coming weeks to become completely insurmountable by the Russians. The Ukrainians will not be able to beat the Russians at all, and they will eventually lose, and that losing date is coming closer and closer, the more difficult the situation comes for the Ukrainians, and that is mainly caused by the lack of shells both in artillery and in air defense, allowing the Russians to freely strike across the front line and in the back line. It is reported by Russian sources that the aviation is working very closely along the front line with hardly any resistance. If the Ukrainians run out of their energy grid by the winter, then they will be in a very, very difficult situation. If the Russians have a good summer with the 10-to-1 artillery advantage, the Ukrainians could lose significant portions of their own country in the next coming weeks and months. This would not be talking about the small frontline advances we have been talking about for over a year, but instead major offensives across the front, taking huge parts of territory, because 10-to-1 artillery advantage is something we haven't seen since the very start of the war. The biggest advantage the Russians have had was about 10-to-1 at the very start, and the lowest advantage they have had was a disadvantage of about 1.5-to-1 in favor of the Ukrainians during the Ukrainian summer offensive, as the Russians were saving up their own shells at that time for later offensive operations. So with this, we see that the Russians right now, with a 10-to-1 artillery advantage, would have a significant advantage across the front, not to mention its air force and the superior amount of troops that they have available right now, combining that with the Russians saving up on other parts such as military equipment, armored vehicles, etc., allowing them to launch these armored assaults, where they got a foothold in Krasnoyarivka, for example, and east of Jazov Yar. So with all of this, we see that the situation is continuously developing in favor of the Russians, and the Ukrainians are slowly getting closer and closer to complete defeat as they deny to negotiate at the same time as they are losing at the battlefield. And that is going to be all for this update. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out my Patreon for additional content. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.